Hi, today's the 19th of February, 2018, and we're going to talk about the truths about childbirth choices today. We are where we are in the childbirth conversation because of what's happened before. History doesn't come out of the blue, even though for each generation we feel that it sort of is, because we're living in a particular trend or a particular, global phenomena now. But the reality is that we are always in the present because of what's happened in the past. And because of my age and having been involved in birth for 45 years, that what I can see is that change of history from when I first gave birth in 1970, where women had no choices, to today, where women do have a lot of choices. Before I decided to give this talk, I did some more research on the internet about what type of birth plans websites are offering women as templates to make. And they're still very, very extensive. I've gone to the BUMP birth plan tool, which is very good. But it's pages and pages of what women want and what they don't want. And there's something about it that is great, because when I gave birth in 1970, we'd just followed the standards of care that were in the hospital. That was the evidence-based practice of the day. We went into the hospital in the United States, and whatever they considered to be the normal practice in that local hospital, then that's what happened to us. And that's no different than going to a hospital if you're sick or if you have an injury. You get booked in, they take time, you wait, people do assessments, you hang out, people come in and do assessments again, you hang out longer, and that's what it's like. Then people can do procedures and they can monitor things. That's what it's like. It's a place where you go to have assessments and to have monitoring and to have necessary procedures. And birth was like that in the 70s, and to a large extent it's still like that. The evidence-based practice has changed, and it's changed from my mother's generation post-World War II. So it's positive. Things have changed. We now can go into a maternity ward, and they have more choices available for us, and they're trying to make birth in a hospital environment, by and large, more enjoyable. So when I gave birth in 1970, my husband was in that particular hospital, the first group of fathers that could come in to the labor. They couldn't yet come into the delivery. The delivery was still done in another room. So very small changes have occurred, but they have been very extensive. So for instance, when I gave birth, you couldn't hold your baby after the birth. Now they do. They didn't delay the cutting of the cord in many places. They do. My baby went into a nursery. Now they often room in. There wasn't breastfeeding back then. Now there is. I couldn't eat or drink. Now you can. I couldn't get out of bed. Now you can. There are so many changes. Before, if they gave you painkillers, they basically gave you just a shot or an injection. In my mother's generation, women were knocked out with scopolamine, twilight sleep. When you had a cesarean, which was rare, there was a 4.5% cesarean, you were given a general anesthetic. Now you're given an epidural. Then you were cut from your pubic bone to your belly button. Now you're cut in a bikini cut, which permits you to try for vaginal birth after cesarean. So there are many, many positive things. And yet the generation that occurred with these positive changes sort of lost an appreciation for those changes. And what they did was to say, you have to keep on refining the changes you want. You have to keep on having an expectation of your obstetrician or your midwife or the staff at the hospital to give you more and more and more and more. And there were things like, I want music, I want more than one person, I want to bring my own clothes, which all makes sense. But when it comes down to the experience that women have in birth, so many of the things that they put on their birth plan don't eventuate or they don't want. And this is where the reality about birth choice as a goal, because what is the goal? There's a goal when people say we should have choices. Often when people say we want choices, what they're actually saying is we want choices so that people can do a very specific thing. It's not that we want every choice. And that's what happened with birth, because birth choices evolved from a phase in childbirth, both in New Zealand, where I live now and where our trust is, and in the United States, there was a short period of time, about a generation, where there were birth skills. And so there was a very high social expectation that everybody in the United States learn Lamaze. That was the first childbirth education course. And then some people paid for the Bradley method. But those skills, those approach to birth was focused entirely on women who wanted a natural birth, a pain-free labor, and less medical care. They were specifically advocated to achieve that. And as I've said in previous talks, that was our fatal flaw. These three obstetricians, Grantley, Dick Reed, Birth Without Fear, Lamaze, and Bradley, should have said, giving birth is an activity all women have to do who are pregnant, and every woman should be skilled to do it. That was the fatal flaw, and that has had, because the present comes from the past, that past has led to where we are. If a decision, an emotional decision, had been made by these men independently, that giving birth is just an activity that every woman should be skilled for, and let's see what happens when everybody is skilled, because nobody had thought about that before. I work in third world countries, not involved in birth, but I can tell you there is no traditional birthing that's universal. There aren't skills that women are taught about birth in traditional communities, although there are very strict rules of do and do not before, during the pregnancy, and afterwards. But during the birth, honestly, around the world, people are led by the truth about childbirth is there's no way to know what your birth's going to be like. Therefore, there's nothing you can do to prepare for it. Well, people know that's not true. So in all traditional cultures, in whatever way they do it, there are huge do's and don'ts in pregnancy that are trying to safeguard the mother and baby during birth. But birth itself is however it unfolds, which means people are trying to help women get through it the best they can. But Lamaze and Bradley and Grantley Dick Reed were the first people, three men, obstetricians, who said, here, let's give women some breathing techniques. And those breathing techniques varied from these different methods. And what was interesting was that they turned out to be techniques and not skills, because they didn't adjust, they didn't adapt, and they weren't sustainable. But they were the first. So there could have been an evolution of birth skills from when I gave birth in the 70s. Then they would have coupled with choice, and that would have made more sense. But they didn't, because birth advocates who were gung-ho, they were seeing that birth was becoming more standard and medicalized in the 50s. But the birth advocates in the 50s, they took on this idea that skills could produce this natural birth, pain-free labor, and less medical care, instead of opening up skills to everyone. And then the skills didn't work. They didn't achieve that sufficiently. So the next group of birth advocates, when I became aware of childbirth in the early 1970s after I gave birth to my first child in 1970, was they said, well, skills don't work to achieve that. So we want choice. We want women to have choice. So as I said a bit earlier, whenever you say there's a choice, people actually who are advocating choice in a particular topic want choice to go in a certain direction. And natural birth advocates wanted choice to go in a certain direction, which was to have a more natural birth, pain-free labor, or labor without medications, and less medical care. So today, before I gave this talk, I went to the bump and looked at their birth plan. And it's just page after page after page of what you want when you get to the hospital. So if I look at the pages now and just look at the issues, you talk a little bit about your medical history and what's your plan of birth and who you want with you. There's a list, what you'd like during a labor, which has a list of over 10 things, how you'd like to spend your first stage, a big list, what you're not interested in, what fetal monitoring will look like, another list. I'd like labor or augmentation, a big list, pain relief, almost 20. During the birth, over 10. I'll bring a list, and then as your baby's delivered, another list of over 10, a whole list around episiotomies or not, immediately after delivery, a list, if there's a C-section, a big list, about the baby, a list about breastfeeding, and on and on and on. And that I'm just telling you half of what's on, even just the topics of the birth plan. So what's happening is that women are going into a hospital environment and giving this birth plan to their obstetrician or the staff, who then rotate every 8 hours. And women have an expectation that their plan is followed. But I'll tell you, people don't know what they want. And when you open up choice, expect a lot of women to just go, I want a cesarean. I want an epidural. I want all the bells and whistles that the medical profession can provide. Because when we open up choice, we have to accept all sorts of choices. And one of the reasons that there is such a high elevation of the cesarean right now is because choice is opened up. And it was something that had to do with informed consent. So the people who advocated choice, the birth advocates who advocated choice in the early 1970s, that has led to this trend, that removed skills, that didn't allow skills to grow with choice because the skills trend was so narrowly focused on such a small group of people who wanted a natural birth, pain-free labor, and less medical care. And because that failed so many women, they assumed that skills didn't work, rather than understanding that birth is an activity and everybody should be skilled. And it shouldn't be the goal to have a particular type of birth. It's just an activity. Women have to do the activity of giving birth, which means we have to fill time either being passive, being stressed, feeling out of control, or if we have skills, we feel more in control. We feel that we cope better, we manage better, we stay on top of. And if back then we were to have given skills to everybody and said everybody should be skilled, we would not be having the conversation today. Because without skills, women are more likely to choose more medical care. And that's what we see. They choose epidurals. Why do they choose epidurals? They choose epidurals because they're afraid of the natural occurring pain. But it's more than fear of the pain. It's the lack of skills, right? When we're in pain and we have skills to manage it, we don't like the pain. It hurts. But we use skills to stay calmer, more relaxed, to cope, to get through it. Anybody who's had a headache knows that they're using skills. They might be putting ice on their head. They might be turning the lights off. They might be staying very still. They might be breathing. They might be playing relaxing music. They might be taking pain relief as well. But even with pain relief, it's not a magic bullet. They still use skills to cope and stay on top of it. Because if you let yourself get invested in pain, then you just feel like screaming and moaning and curling up in a ball. So it's important to understand that we are still in a choice-based trend, and it's now time for that to change. And so what our trust is saying to you is we need to bring back skills. Now, there have been some skills that have evolved. Pregnancy yoga, active birth, hypnobirthing, hypnobabies. But all of those methods still focus on natural birth rather than all births. Birthing Better, the skills that our trust now holds, were developed in the early 70s by families They wanted skills for all births. And first we focused on the skills to cope and to manage, and the skills that we as women could share and have complementary skills with our husbands or others who helped us. So those skills had to be based on our human body, on who we were as humans. What do we do? How do we breathe? How do we determine whether we have tension? How do we relax tension inside where our baby's coming out? How do we have good nonverbal and verbal communications? And the benefits of being able to share a set of skills are phenomenal. So Birthing Better Families first focused on the birth management skills, and then we focused on how to prepare our body for birth, because we realized that some of the issues that came up during birth, perhaps we could resolve them by spending more time learning skills about how to create space in our body, how to open up our body, how to soften in our body, how to prepare our body to give birth, and then couple those with the skills we used to do the activity of giving birth. And then we expanded into absolutely all birth, because we could see the cesarean rate was rising. It went from 4.5%, and women were knocked out, to 30 or more percent now, and in China 50%. So we then said, well, this is our baby's birth. We're driving to the hospital, we can use skills. We're being prepped, we can use skills. We're giving birth to our baby through surgery. We're numbed, but we're awake, and we can use skills to birth our baby, to fill our time, to work together with our partner. So when we look at childbirth choices, we have to understand that they were advocated for by people who wanted women to choose less medical care. They were an anti-medical response to the increased medicalization of birth. But most women want that medicalization. They want the assessments and monitor, and if necessary, procedures. Women will lay down their lives for their babies if someone says to them, your baby's at risk. Of course they will. But without skills, a large part of why you end up with more medical care is a failure to progress, or obviously not coping. People see how you behave, and when you behave stressed and overwhelmed or passive and shut down, people want to help you. So the medical profession wants to help you. And then if all of your choices go out the window, you end up with mixed feelings about it, because you spent a lot of time preparing your birth plan, and you spent no time learning skills. And because you spent no time learning skills, you didn't use skills. You didn't have them at your disposal to cope and manage. And this is what we have to change. We need to grow skilled birthing families. And we do that with our online course. The Birthing Better Families who developed these skills wanted them to be learned by us as families, not to be taught in a class, not to be done to us by professionals. We're adults. We're having babies. We're parents. We're perfectly capable of spending 5 to 10 minutes every day or every other day from 24 weeks on to prepare our body for birth and learn a set of skills that we and our birth coach can share together. We're perfectly capable. It's not only fun, but it's enlightening. And the benefits are huge, because we cope in the birth. We engage in our baby's birth. We participate. We do the activity of birthing our baby, filling it with skills. That's an amazing experience. So how do you help grow a skilled birthing population? Well, you can donate through PayPal to our charitable trust, because all proceeds return to the trust so that we can continue to do this. And our login is info@birthingbetter.com. You can watch the playlists on YouTube of the myths around childbirth and pass them on. Subscribe to our channel and pass them on to people who have an interest in childbirth. And of course you can purchase one of our 5 online courses, because you'll know that you're going to be learning skills that were developed by mothers and fathers. And that's the most important thing. We're passing on the skills that worked for us. No matter whether our birth plans unfolded the way we wanted, whether we made a birth plan or not, whether choices unexpectedly changed, whether the choices we made were the ones we wanted or didn't want. It didn't matter. We had the skills to birth our baby, and that's what gave us dignity and absolutely obliterated shame, blame, guilt, frustration, anger, and even trauma after birth. Many of us who were skilled had very challenging births and had very traumatic experiences. But because we used skills, we were not left traumatized, and that's important. So see you again. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.